At 8:41 a.m., late spring 1940, somewhere outside the shattered village of Montreval in northern France. The retreat was already collapsing. British units were pulling back in confusion, boots heavy with mud nerves, shredded by Stuka sirens, while German infantry pressed forward with machine precision momentum. Belonged to the enemy, the war had chosen its direction. And then there was Captain Alistair Rowan, who refused to accept it. His platoon was cornered against an abandoned grain tower, surrounded low on ammunition, outnumbered and waiting for annihilation. Any sensible officer would prepare to surrender or die quietly. Rowan chose neither because slung over his shoulder was not a rifle, but a 6-foot yew longbow. The kind England had abandoned centuries earlier at his side hung a massive Highland broadsword. Basket-hilted scarred steel, older than the idea of tanks, and tucked beneath his arm were bagpipes polished and ready. 20th century warfare met medieval defiance. Rowan was 34, lean, athletic. Once a competitive archer, once a stage actor, now an officer with a reputation whispered in mess halls as brilliant or completely insane. A German NCO stepped into view 30 yards away, relaxed, confident, lighting a cigarette. Victory already assumed, Rowan didn't rush. He didn't shout. He calmly knocked an arrow, drew to full length 80 pounds of tension. The bow creaked like a living thing. The battlefield went silent. Then the string snapped. The arrow vanished, and a second later the German collapsed, struck clean through the chest, the cigarette still burning in the mud. History doesn't repeat itself often, but in that moment it did, because that shot became the last recorded kill by longbow in modern warfare. Rowan didn't celebrate. He smiled, drew his sword, raised his voice, and ordered the charge. His creed was simple. An officer without a blade is improperly dressed, and he intended to prove it because some men fight wars with firepower, others fight them with identity, and this war had just met a man who refused to evolve backward. That man was born, Alistair Rowan MacLeod, in October 1907. Not in Britain, but in Port Saline, a colonial harbor in the Indian Ocean. His father, Malcolm Rowan, was a senior infrastructure engineer serving the Empire, as his father had before him. Generations of service tradition, stability, expectation, all the things young Alistair despised. From the moment he could walk, he chased danger, not comfort, climbing roofs, escaping compounds, disappearing into jungles, while servants panicked. By age 6, he knew snakes by sight and storms by smell. The wilderness raised him more than society ever could. When the Great War consumed Europe, the family fled home, settling in the quiet English countryside, a place meant to tame him instead. It bored him into rebellion. Sent to a rigid boarding academy on a windswept island, he absorbed Latin mathematics and discipline. But what captured him was medieval history, knights' oaths, steel and honor, a world where courage had a face, and combat was personal. He didn't study chivalry. He adopted it, shaping his entire identity around an impossible goal to drag ancient honor into mechanized war. In 1925, he entered the Royal Officers' College elite, demanding, unforgiving. He challenged authority constantly, but excelled where it mattered: leadership, endurance, inspiration. Men followed him because he believed in something larger than survival. He graduated commissioned and shipped east to the frontier colonies, where the Empire still pretended control, and where Rowan finally found what he had been waiting for: the edge of the map, the edge of danger, and the beginning of a legend that would only grow stranger, darker, and far more dangerous. In British India, the heat never slept, and neither did Jack. The Empire called it a posting, but for him it was a proving ground. Dusty cantonments, red earth parade, squares and jungles breathing at the edges of order. Jack wasn't there to command battalions or chase medals. His role was smaller on paper: military advisor, archery consultant, morale, oddity bagpipe player. A footnote assignment meant to keep a talented but inconvenient officer occupied. And yet it fit him perfectly, because every strange skill he carried finally had a use. He trained officers in instinct, shooting not for tradition but for focus, teaching them how to slow their breathing, how to see before acting, how to control fear before it controlled them. At dawn, his arrows thudded into targets at impossible ranges, and in the evenings his bagpipes echoed across the barracks, cutting through homesickness like a blade sound, carrying identity, discipline, memory. Men didn't laugh for long because morale rose and confidence followed. Jack wasn't trying to be eccentric. This was simply who he was, and British India let him be all of it. At the same time, another world kept brushing against his life, a quieter stranger. One cinema fascinated him, not as ambition but curiosity. And in 1938, the same year, Europe began to tremble. He appeared briefly in his third film, a polished Anglo-American production about a brash foreign student navigating elite British academia, a Yank at Oxford, a light-hearted mix of comedy and drama, and Jack was barely noticeable. A background officer, a uniform, a presence more than a character, but he was there standing exactly as himself. The screen caught what the army often didn't, a man out of time, comfortable nowhere except in motion. Film was never a career, only a hobby, a side path, a curiosity between postings. Yet it revealed something important. Jack could move between worlds, colonial outposts, parade grounds, medieval fantasies, and modern art, without ever changing his core. That same year, rumors hardened into certainty. Germany rearmed, borders tensed, alliances cracked, and Jack felt it coming, the pull of something larger, more violent, more fitting than any peacetime role. British India had sharpened him, not dulled him. His skills aligned, his identity solidified, bow-blade pipes, leadership, spectacle, purpose. All of it was waiting for a real war. And when the call finally came, Jack didn't hesitate because men like him aren't shaped by conflict. They are revealed by it. And Europe was about to reveal exactly what kind of weapon Jack truly was in the next chapter. Steel sang as Jack tore the claymore free from its scabbard, a basket-hilted Scottish broadsword, 35 inches of honed history, heavy, perfectly balanced, lethal in hands that understood it instinctively. He didn't descend the tower, he stormed it. Boots hammering stone steps, bursting into daylight with the blade already raised, screaming a raw Highland war cry ripped from another century. Medieval tactics met automatic fire, and Jack was the collision point in sanity. Yes, but the beautiful kind, the kind that moves men before reason can stop them. British soldiers froze for a heartbeat, shocked, inspired, confused, all at once. Then training took over, officers lead, men follow, and faith does the rest. Bayonets snapped forward, boots surged, and they charged after him because Jack was always ahead, always exposed, always first. Bullets stitched the air machine guns, rattled rifles, cracked dirt leapt around his feet. Yet none touched him. Luck, destiny, divine mockery of statistics, call it what you want. Jack kept running sword, flashing sunlight off steel. He wanted the pipes, wanted the sound that split fear, but there was no time, only speed, only violence. Then contact, bodies collided, range, collapsed. Noise dissolved into breath and muscle. Jack hit the line like a blade through cloth, slashing, cutting, stabbing the broadsword, devastating in close quarters where rifles were clumsy and panic faster than commands. Germans recoiled, stunned at the sight of a British officer carving space with a medieval sword, shock turning to fear, fear to collapse. And in that chaos, Jack moved relentlessly forward. Not hunting, not hesitating, simply executing momentum itself. The charge broke them. Not because it made sense, but because it shouldn't have worked. And when something impossible comes screaming at you with steel and conviction, logic dies first. This wasn't madness. It was leadership distilled, movement, belief, action, and the men behind him felt it as clearly as the enemy did. And when the smoke thinned and the ground fell silent, Jack stood blood-spattered, unhit, unbowed, proof that sometimes war rewards those who refuse to fight it on expected terms. And this moment wasn't an ending. It was a declaration, because if Jack could do this against rifles and machine guns, then the war had no idea what kind of problem it had just met. And what awaited him next would test that defiance beyond any battlefield imaginable. Of course he survived. He always did by this point. Men stopped asking how some whispered unkillable, others stopped whispering at all because there was proof. Not rumor, not campfire exaggeration, actual film footage, grainy, black and white, undeniable. Jack standing on the deck of a raiding vessel, pipes tucked under his arm after a successful commando strike, sea spray in the air, adrenaline still fresh, playing Highland tunes, while exhausted soldiers laughed, cheered. And then Jack danced a full Highland fling, boots, thumping wood rifles stacked nearby, enemies still counting their dead. This wasn't legend. This wasn't a story. Polished later, this was documented history, reels archived, preserved, a British officer celebrating survival and victory, like it was the most natural thing in the world. That footage changed everything because it proved Mad Jack wasn't a myth created by bored soldiers. He was real, deadly insane, effective morale, weapon, human symbol. The army took notice, command took notice, and eventually paperwork caught up with courage. He was awarded the Military Cross not for spectacle, not for eccentricity, but for raw battlefield bravery, leadership under fire, and operational success. The citation was dry, restrained, British understatement, unable to capture what men actually felt following him. But it didn't need to, because the results spoke louder. Jack didn't just survive missions. He transformed them, raids, hit harder units, moved faster. Men believed more deeply when he was there because fear retreats when someone runs toward it, smiling, pipe, sword, bow, film, medals, all fragments of the same truth that Jack wasn't immune to bullets. He simply refused to live as if they decided his limits. And that refusal would carry him further, deeper into the war, into captivity, escape, obsession, and defiance. On a scale even his enemies would struggle to understand, because the next phase of his life wouldn't be about charging forward, it would be about refusing to stop even when the world tried to cage him. And that is where Mad Jack truly became impossible to break. It didn't matter in the end. Not authority, not shouting, not even fear. Rank did the work. Rank and instinct drilled into men long before the war ever began. The Germans saw an officer, blade drawn, boots planted unshaken, and something older than logic clicked into place. Orders must be obeyed, weapons lowered, lines formed. Jack reached British positions intact, as if the battlefield itself had decided to let him pass. And behind him came the impossible. Not 6 prisoners. Not a handful, but 42 German soldiers walking, hands raised, following a single sword-wielding officer and 2 stunned British privates, like it was the most natural thing in the world. A mass surrender, without gunfire, without threats, just presence. Other Germans had seen the charge, seen the steel, seen their line break, and chose the only option that still made sense: survival. This wasn't rumor. It was witnessed, recorded, verified, confirmed by multiple units. 42 prisoners taken by one man armed with a broadsword, because war isn't always decided by firepower. Sometimes it's decided by certainty. Jack Churchill embodied certainty, absolute conviction, moving forward without hesitation, and men on both sides felt it. The British followed because duty demanded it. The Germans surrendered because authority still mattered even when wrapped in madness. That moment shattered expectations. It shouldn't have worked. It couldn't have worked. And yet it did. Because Jack didn't fight like a modern officer. He fought like a force of nature, and nature doesn't negotiate. This wasn't luck. This wasn't exaggeration. This was documented reality. 42 prisoners, 1 sword, 2 escorts, and a man. The war could not process. Jack Churchill, impossible, undeniable, and very real. And the higher command still didn't know what to do with him, which was exactly what made the next chapter even more dangerous. Immediately, Jack shifted modes, battlefield instincts replaced by captivity logic. He observed everything: angles, distances, guard, rotations, footsteps, timing, how long a cigarette burned, how long boredom lasted. Patterns always existed, and Jack always found them. Authority still mattered even behind wire, so did seniority and experience. And quietly, naturally, leadership settled on him again. Tunneling became the answer, not hope, not rescue, not mercy, but engineering. Dirt measured, hidden, dispersed silently. Night after night. British officers' RAF airmen hands blistered spirits, focused teamwork forged underground. A month of careful work, slow, precise stolen tools, whispered signals, guards passed overhead, unaware inches from escape. September 1944 arrived, cool, dark. Perfect Jack went first. Of course, senior officer, oldest prisoner, earned by action, not rank. He slid into freedom, breath held, heart steady, emerging into open night, followed by 3 others. 4 men total gone before absence could be counted. They moved fast, vanished into countryside, toward rail lines, toward borders, toward anything that wasn't a camp. It was another impossible moment, quietly executed, no applause, no witnesses, just resolve. And though recapture would come later, though the war still had teeth, this escape sealed the truth of Jack Churchill. He wasn't defined by weapons or madness or spectacle. He was defined by refusal to accept limits, cages, expectations, time itself, bow, sword, pipes, tunnel charge, surrender, escape. Every chapter different, same core. One man choosing motion over fear, again and again. Mad Jack wasn't a nickname. It was a warning, because history remembers firepower, but it never forgets the man who proved that belief, discipline, and audacity could still bend a modern war and survive it.